Hi everyone, my name is C.Dodds. I'm so excited to be here. I've never been to Greece before, so this is my first trip. I got here on Tuesday. I'm still jet lagged, but still very excited to be with you all. I don't understand Greek, and so the comedian sounded really funny based on your responses, but it was all Greek to me. So I am going to talk with you about principles-based programming. Before I do that, though, you'll notice I'm wearing a shirt that says Epic Web. She announced me as Epic Web. I also made Epic React and testing JavaScript. But the URL here is different. It's epicai.pro, and that's because I just released this yesterday. I'm going all in on AI, and I've got a talk later today. If you are interested in developing applications that can talk to AI and opening up your application to users who are using AI, then come check that out. Okay, so we're going to be doing some, some exercises. Everybody, if you're physically able, please stand up. We need to get your bodies moving. You just listened to a comedian, and you're like, I'm feeling all relaxed. Your brain is not ready for this. So we got to get blood flowing. I want you to point your arms out in front of you and squat down and come back up. There we go. This feels good. All right, we're going to do 12. That was just a practice. That doesn't count. Okay, we're going to count out loud together. You ready? 1, 2, you're doing great. 3, 4, awesome. You can go really low if you want, or just like a little one. 6, 7, 8. I like the smiles. 9, 10. This is so fun. Let's start over. 1, no, just kidding. And 12. Okay, stretch over your head as high as you can, and even higher than that. And then stretch over to one side and over to the other. All right, awesome. You can sit down. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Some of you may have noticed that I forgot to pack my belt, so I'm going to be pulling up my pants throughout this. All right, so I'm going to start out with a story, and my confidence monitor is over here, so I'm going to move over here sometimes. So, years ago, a long time ago, I was at a conference like this, and I had somebody come up to me, and he brought his laptop, and it had a spreadsheet with, I don't know, every possible framework for the web, for UI. And he had every possible feature that you could imagine for that a framework could support for UI. And little check marks on whether that particular framework supported that feature. And he seemed really stressed to me because he was trying to decide which of all these frameworks he should use. And it was really difficult for him to come to a conclusion on, I guess I should just choose the one that has the most features or something. It was just really difficult for him. And I felt really bad because I was just like, dude, you just got to choose one. They're probably going to be just fine. At the time, I was using AngularJS, so this was quite a while ago. And I just said, dude, you just got to choose one. And he just couldn't get that. And so I think lots of us can relate to this, the analysis paralysis feeling of I have so many things that I need to decide, and I can't decide those. It's decision fatigue. There are endless arguments about the frameworks, libraries, and tools that we can use, and it's exhausting. And I am going to be giving a couple examples of the different kinds of decisions that I have made and how I came to make those decisions. And my goal isn't to convince you to make the same decisions that I made, but rather to create a framework for yourself for making decisions. So how can you easily make decisions without all of the stress that friend of mine experienced? So the principles-based programming idea is based on the fact that rather than just having a map of everything that's possible, you get a compass that can guide the direction of your decisions and help shape your craft. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sorry, I want to move this over here just to reference. So what are principles? Really, they are your foundational beliefs, guides for your decisions. They really help with collaboration. We'll talk about that a little bit more. They're more stable than the tech tool choices, so they should last. A principle is not, I use Angular instead of React, or I use Postgres instead of MySQL. That's not a principle. You can use principles to help you make those decisions. So our principles are much more broad than the tech stacks that we choose. It's the why behind the what. So we know what we're doing, but can you explain why we made those decisions, how we got there? Principles are not a style guide. I do have a style guide. If you want to code the way I code, there's the Epic Programming Style Guide. This is much more subjective. Right? Like whether or not we're using tabs or spaces doesn't actually matter for the end user. It's tabs, by the way. We can talk about that later if you want. But yeah, so it's not a style guide. It's more like this. And I know you can't really read this. That's not the intent. But these are the Epic Programming Principles. I'll be referencing a couple of these throughout the talk as examples of the types of principles that you could come up with for yourself. Yeah, if you want to, you can just borrow mine. I spent like 2 months just thinking about it, and I'll talk about that process as well. So, yeah, let's start with what principles or why principles really matter. And I've got a couple of reasons. So first is clarity. Principles give us clarity because they're a consistent filter for our decisions, and they help us navigate the tyranny of choice. Like my friend that I talked about earlier was just suffering under the tyranny of choice. So as an example principle for how principles give us clarity, I have this principle: software is built for people by people. You've probably heard this before. Also, the variant for developers by developers. But with a principle like this, each one of these principles has like 2 paragraphs and some examples explaining them. So if you do want to dive in deeper to the principles than I do in this talk, you can look at it later. But the basic idea is you've got to remember the users that you're building your software for. And if you are not the type of person who would use the software you're building, then you have to really try to understand the types of people who use your software. And beyond that, even if you are the type of person who would use the software you build, there are a lot of different kinds of people who might use your software differently. So understanding the people that you're building your software for can really help you build better software. For example, if I were to build some software that is for breastfeeding moms, I would probably need to interview moms, and because I have no experience with that. This will impact the user experience that you care about, the accessibility of your site, and also it's built by people, and remembering that the other people that you're working with who are also building the software with you are also people, and they've got experiences and struggles and everything. So instead of gossiping about your coworkers and how they're not delivering their stuff, yeah, like you want to address issues, but maybe you can have a little bit of empathy because they are people just like all of us. We're all struggling through this stuff. So principles help bring clarity. This is just an example of one of the many principles in my principles that bring clarity to my decisions. All right, the next thing is they help us with sustainability. We want to move as fast as possible while still maintaining quality. And there's like a really good cross-section where that makes sense. If you move too fast, you leave behind you a wake of tech debt. You move too slow, then you never ship and you have to find another job where hopefully you'll move faster the next time. So principles help me move quickly and sustainably, move effectively long-term, and avoid burnout and tech debt spirals. So an example of a principle that helps me with this is make it work, make it right, and make it fast. I am not the Kent who came up with that. It was actually Kent Beck. Kents are really cool. But yeah, so this is a really great principle. And here's an example where the principles that you come up with for yourself do not have to be created by yourself. You can use other people's practices and principles in your own principles document. For sure, you want to be inspired by what other people have done. So in this case, the order really matters, right? Like if, and we're talking about how principles help with the sustainability of your software development. So if we decide, oh, you know what, I'm gonna, like every single key that I press is going to be as fast as possible. Not like typing fast, but like the code that you write just has to be fast always. And it's very easy to fall into this because it's fun to say, you know what, instead of this type of data structure, I'm going to use this one because it's always faster and it's always better. You know, maybe it's harder to understand, but I'm going to use it because it's faster. Or whatever the case may be. And then you find out later, oh, we actually don't need that feature. Or that doesn't do what the user wanted it to do. So we're going to delete that. So it's really important that you first make it work and then iterate on it, make it right, and then you can make it fast. And so it helps you avoid optimizing broken and gold plating the unnecessary. Like, we're going to put a bunch of polish on this UI. It's going to be so sick, and then we're going to send it to our PM, and then they're going to be like, actually, we canceled that feature. Sorry, I didn't tell you. So now, I do think that it's important to put emphasis into your craft and do the best that you can. We'll talk about that later too. But it's important that you follow this specific amount of, or these specific steps so that you don't wind up optimizing something that shouldn't exist. Okay, another thing is collaboration. It really helps to have a common language for why we do things, so you don't have to keep on explaining your reasoning behind the comments you make in a PR, and reduce the opinion-based arguments. On that note, I'm really glad that we have automatic code formatters these days that can get rid of all those really annoying arguments in PRs now. We can talk about more interesting things. But principles reduce those sorts of comments even further. So here's an example. This one is by a Kent that is standing on the stage right now. A few years ago, I posted on what was then Twitter, the more your tests resemble the way your software is used, the more confidence they can give you. And so that has turned into a principle that has been adopted by a large part of at least the UI space. And this principle really helps with collaboration, because if your coworker makes a pull request and they're reaching into some private method of some class or something like that, or they're reaching into the React component state and they're trying to make assertions on that or something, then you can just point to this principle that maybe your team has agreed to follow and say, hey, that's breaking this principle. And instead of having to explain the whole thing again, they'll be like, oh yeah, you're right, the user is not going to be able to access that private class, or they're not going to be able to access the state of the component or whatever. So I'll figure out a different way to test this. So it helps you to make your test, this specific principle helps make your test more reliable, and it avoids arguing the irrelevant stuff. Again, this is just about team clarity and being able to communicate and collaborate better. This is something that principles do for us. It's really great. I want to give you a couple more examples of principles for a couple of reasons. One, I have a lot of time for this talk, and so I'm going to throw in a couple more that I just want to talk about. And two, I think it's useful for you to see some examples of what are the types of things that I should put in my document of principles, software development principles, things that I really care about. So here are a couple. This one is one of my favorites. Don't solve problems, eliminate them. So you might see that one and be like, wait a second, we're software developers. Solving problems is what we do. But what does it mean to eliminate a problem? Let me give you an example. Let's say that you're building a web application and the home page is really important that it's fast for SEO reasons or whatever. But it's authenticated, and so there's some data that you need to access to be able to display that home page. Or maybe it's not authenticated, maybe there's just some data, like you've got some like pseudo real-time thing that you need to display on there. And so that page load speed is really slow. And that's causing a problem. So you say, or maybe coworkers in the past, they said, you know what, we'll just add a cache to this and then it'll be fast. So that core problem, the trunk of the tree, you might say, is page is slow. So we solve the problem with a branch, and that would be cache. But that branch has branches off of it. So our problems, or our solutions to problems, create more problems. And that's just our lives, our entire lives are just solving problems that were created because of solutions for other problems. So, okay, what are the problems of caching? Well, now we got to think about how to compute the cache key efficiently, how to make sure that one user doesn't see another user's data from that cache. So we got to deal with that. And then also the storage. Like, okay, now I've got a Redis service that I've got to make sure that it's handling loading of that data. And so let's say that you are right now working on the revalidation. So a user made a change to the data, and then they saw the stale data because they saw the cached version without their changes. Okay, so we're working on that, the cache invalidation. One of the hardest problems in computer science, they tell me. And okay, well, the more and more you work on this problem, I want you to stop and be like, why am I working on this? Why does this problem exist? Is there a way I can make this problem just not exist, not be a problem? And so then you go back, okay, so why do I work on this? Because we have cache invalidation problem. Well, why do we have a cache? Well, it's because this page was really slow and this request for this data was really slow, so we're caching that data. Okay, well, let's remove that. And maybe you find out that it used to be slow and it's not slow anymore. You can delete the cache. You eliminated the problem. It's gone. You don't even have to work on your thing. You can go like to the beach for the rest of the week. That would be great. Okay, no, let's say it is still slow. Okay, so instead of going off on this branch for caching, maybe there's a different solution that we have for this. Oh, let's try and add a database index. Oh, wow, all of a sudden it's like way fast. I don't need to cache it anymore. And we eliminate an entire branch of problems and solutions and problem solutions by taking a different direction. So don't solve problems, eliminate them is all about looking for trade-offs. Really, I'm just describing trade-offs, but finding different approaches, even when you're like 6 decisions in. Go upstream and find out, like, maybe there's a different way we could do this. Like, if I knew how hard this was going to be down here at the time I made this decision, I might have made a different decision. And so you got to constantly reevaluate those decisions. Another example, how many people here actually are would consider yourself a UI developer? Yeah, I am feeling lonely. No, just kidding. no, that's good, it's good. So the React hooks example probably is going to fall flat. So I'm not going to use that example. Here's a more real world example we can probably all relate to. Sustainability in public or in transportation, in your personal vehicles. Gas-powered cars cannot be sustainable. That's just a fact. EVs changes that in a completely different way. Walk all the way back. Okay, how do I do personal transport? Well, we made this decision to go down gas-powered cars, but there are all these other problems. So let's back up and let's go this other direction with our architecture for how we get around. We'll use electricity. And yeah, maybe you generate your electricity with coal. Technically, the stats that I've seen, even if you generate with coal, it's still greener in general over the long term than a gas-powered car. But there's also a path for generating that electricity in a clean way. And so we completely eliminate all the problems with even oil changes and stuff. All of that goes away by going with this different direction. So think about the problems that you're working on and find ways that you can switch the decisions that were made before. Another one that I really like is don't confuse simplicity with familiarity. Just because you're trying something new and it's hard for you to figure out doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it's not as easy for you because it's not familiar. So lots of examples of this, but my favorite one is what's coming up for all of us right now. Everybody is talking about this and thinking about this. AI, artificial intelligence, how does that fit in to what I'm doing now? As a software developer, using AI to help me write code, this feels different. Oh, I'm not sure that I trust this AI thing. Just because it's not a familiar workflow for you doesn't mean that it's a bad one. And maybe there are ways that you can use it in a good way to make you more productive. Or on the other side of things, maybe there are things that you can add to your application to make it more useful for users who are using AI. So just because it's something new doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. So stay curious and build on the knowledge that you already have. All right, this next one is another one of my favorites. This is avoid hasty abstractions. I can't claim this one. The acronym is AHA programming, which I just think is great. It's similar to DRY, except much less dogmatic. But I didn't come up with the acronym, and also Sandy Metz is probably the originator of the idea. So the idea here is with dry programming, let's say you're rendering a UI and you're displaying the user's name. So you've got your first name and you've got their last name. And you're going to make, you've got two places you're doing that. So you're going to make a function, because we don't repeat ourselves, right? And that function is get display name. And so now that's just like, right now, that function doesn't do a whole lot. But then you have like this third place that needs to display an honorarium. So like doctor or Mr. or Mrs., whatever. But the other two don't need to display that. Did I just press a button? Whoops, spoiler alert. Twice, couple times. Oh man, yikes. Just hold this far away from myself. We make a Boolean that says whether we want to display the honorarium. And then we've got another one that needs to display the suffix, but not the rest of them. So we need another Boolean. And you, like all of us know this. We've experienced this, where we have this abstraction, and it just feels more natural to enhance the abstraction than to duplicate it, right? Like we feel like we're bad developers if we're duplicating something and doing something that's close. We want to just keep things, change it in this place and it changes everywhere. It's beautiful. But we end up with abstractions that are the wrong abstractions. They're very costly to have the wrong abstraction. And so what's much better is to wait for the patterns to emerge. Just duplicate. Go ahead, it's fine. Duplicate your stuff and wait for the code to scream at you saying, I need an abstraction, where it's so obvious. And what you'll end up with more often, especially for that specific example, is like maybe 3 or 4 abstractions that are each very specially catered for those specific use cases, rather than one really complicated abstraction. So avoid hasty abstractions. That's another type of principle that's like kind of focused to the code. Now, principles can also be about your business and how you think about doing business. So another one of my principles is know where to make money. There are lots of ways for us to make money, and you can get very distracted by every small little thing that you can do in your business to make money. But the thing is that money changes the relationship. Just having that transaction is going to make things more awkward, for lack of a better term, more difficult for that relationship. And it also changes the way that you think about things. So what I say is you decide what you do to make money, and then everything else you do for free or you don't do it at all. And you be very clear and intentional about what things you monetize. It will improve your relationships, protect your time, and protect your relationships. So principles can be about the way that you run your business as well. Also, principles can be about things that are like your own character. In fact, lots of them should be about your character as a person. So strive for excellence. There's this quote from John Allen, a very old architect years and years ago. Whate'er thou art, act well thy part. And basically what this means is whatever you commit to, commit fully or don't commit at all. Be the kind of person that people like working with, because they're like, oh yeah, Sandy, when I give her a task, she does it. So I'm just going to keep on giving her tasks that she wants to do. I'm happy I want to keep her happy. She's doing awesome. I really like working with Sandy. And the more and more you do that, the more people will give you the kinds of tasks that you want. And more challenging tasks. So even on the small things, on the little chores that you're given, just do a good job. And you feel better about yourself anyway. You can't put a price on that. So they can be about yourself. Embrace reality is another one that's kind of about yourself, but this one is some people, like let's say you've got a coworker who left the company and their code base landed in your lap. And now you gotta like add features to it, change things, whatever. Turns out it's a really bad code base. Some people would be like, this is awful, I hate this, manager, give it to somebody else, whatever, this is terrible. But I want you to be the kind of person who's like, man, this stinks. Let's make a plan to make it not stink. Speaking of code smells, I guess. So deal with what things are. Deal with what is, not with what you wish it to be. Embracing reality is a really important principle. So a lot of your principles can be about your mindset for the way that you view the world in software development. And I want to call out another thing about the principles you write. Sometimes they will conflict. Sometimes you'll have two principles that are like, I I have this choice to make, but these principles kind of don't really line up. Like this principle says do this, and this one says that. Sometimes you just have to make a judgment call. So actually, another one of the principles that I have is value pragmatism over purity, just because I'm not talking about like virtuous purity. I'm talking about like dogmatic, follow the principles side of purity. So sometimes we just got to deal with the way that things are, kind of like embracing reality. Okay, that did not work. Oh, no, it did. Guides, not shackles. There we go. Okay, so I want to take you on a couple decisions that I have gone through during my time as a software developer. A few years ago, I made this project called the Epic Stack. The Epic Stack is a project generator and reference that people use if they want to build web applications the way I do. So this is, I always keep this up to date with my latest approach. If I'm going to build a new application today, this is how I'm going to start it. And one of the features of the Epic Stack is the decision documents. So as I'm making decisions around which technologies to use, or even services, or whatever, approaches to coding, I'm going to write those things down in the decision documents. And I actually wrote these decision documents way before I wrote the principles, but I actually was able to use the decision documents to help me write the principles, so that it went in the opposite direction. But we're going to go through a couple of these decisions that I've made. And again, you might disagree with some of the decisions I made. I think this first one, some of you are going to be like, pfft, and I'd love to talk to you about it. But you might disagree with some of these decisions I've made. But my goal is just to help you understand how these principles can help you make these kinds of decisions. You may have different principles than me, and that's fine. So here we go, SQLite. I decided to use SQLite for a web application that can serve a very large audience. People do it, and it works awesome. And I have used lots of different databases. So the challenge here was, what database do I choose? Postgres, MySQL, Mongo, or SQLite, or anything else? And so a couple of the principles that I think about when I think about this challenge is problem elimination and value of time. So I like to deploy my applications all over the world so I'm as close to the user as possible. And so when I started feeling like that was important, I used Postgres with read replicas all over the world. And what that means is, with every instance of my application, I have to have another service for Postgres to be running. And that's a lot of services to have to worry about managing. And there are really great hosts, providers, and stuff that kind of make that pretty easy. But I also, not mentioned here, but I also used Redis as well. So I've got my app instance, my Postgres, and my Redis deployed all over the world in each one of those regions. And it was just a lot. It also costs a lot. And on top of that, even though the data center's in the same place, there's some latency there. And one really cool thing about SQLite is that it's just a file. Oh, and sorry, one other thing is the local development story is kind of annoying, having to pull up Docker. I know, I'm the front-end UI JavaScript engineer, and I'm complaining about Docker. Very stereotypical of me. But it is kind of annoying to have to do that, especially when running your test. You have to spin it up, and the test can't have their own instance of the database, or it's really complicated to set up. But with SQLite, so easy. Just create a file, do your thing, and delete the file. The development experience of SQLite is just phenomenal. And then the fact that it's a file on disk means there's no network latency. You can have as many queries as you want, and they are all nanosecond response, provided the query isn't crazy. So there are a lot of really huge benefits, and that helps me save on my problems that I have to deal with. And it also helps me with my personal time in managing all of this stuff. And so the result was simpler dev, better operations, and better performance. So I've been running SQLite in production for years, and I love it, and it's fabulous. But that's how I use the principles to help guide that decision. Another decision, client preference cookies. Okay, so you're working late at night, and you're doing a search, and you need to go to this website to learn about this, and you open it up, and it's like, ah, my eyes, that site has light mode, no. And then it switches to dark mode. You're like, oh, good, what a relief. But like, it stinks that you had that flash of light mode. This is called a flash of unstyled content, and it's because when they rendered it on the server, they didn't know that you wanted dark mode, and so they just rendered light mode as a default. And then when it gets to the browser, they can switch it and be like, oh, you want dark mode, great, I'll render it as dark mode. There are other ways to get around this. It's not actually that difficult of a problem to solve. But there are other situations similar to this. If you've ever seen, like, somebody renders the time, and then it changes because they realize what time zone you're in, that is not great. It'd be nice for the server to know what time zone you're coming from. But if you've never been there, you don't have user preferences, they don't know. So there's actually, so that's the challenge. The server needs to know user preferences like the theme or maybe your time zone for the SSR to avoid a flash of incorrect content. Okay, so that, yeah, that's fine. The problem is that the browser doesn't send the server enough information for you to make those determinations when you're rendering your HTML. And there is actually a specification that has been ongoing. I'm not sure when, maybe it'll eventually be standardized. But the idea is that the browser sends a request for a document. The server says, hey, actually, before I send you the document, here are some additional pieces of information I need to know, like your theme and your time zone or whatever else. And so that goes back to the server, and the server's like, okay, great. Now I have the information I need to generate the HTML. And then it sends that up. So that is not in the spec yet. Nobody implements that. And so I was evaluating whether I should just implement it myself as like a JavaScript thing. So thinking about how software is built for people, I think, okay, this UX thing is something I really want to improve. And I don't want people to have to suffer this. That's super duper annoying. And one of the problems with this approach is it means that the client has to make a request to the server. The server comes back to the client, and then the client makes another request to the server. So that's not exactly like the most optimal thing that you can do. But being pragmatic about that, I decided that the user experience was much more important to avoid that flash of unstyled content. And then embracing the reality that this spec isn't actually implemented yet, so I've got to come up with something myself. And so what I came up with was just a little script in the head of the document that says, did we render the things that resemble the user's preferences? If we did not, then let's set some cookies and then trigger a refresh. And what this led to was no flash of unstyled content, much better UX, even though there's a slight reload time. Now, a note on the slight reload time. This is, because I've got a little bit of time, I just want to mention this. This drives me insane. I don't know if you all have experienced this, but if you go to youtube.com, and the last time you were there, you had light mode, and this, like your system preferences, now it's dark mode. You go to youtube.com, it loads up the whole light mode site, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm wrong. And it does a reload with a theme refresh equals 1 in the query string, and then it changes to dark mode. So you see the whole thing, and then it does a refresh. And that's similar to what I'm doing, but they're doing it after the whole app is done rendering. It is so annoying. If you work at YouTube, please come talk to me. I will explain, like, this is the easiest thing, so easy. So a little script tag in the head, like just like 3 lines of JavaScript could solve that problem forever. It just kills me. Maybe I'm the only one who has my theme switch, like daytime is light mode and nighttime is dark mode. But for everybody in the world who does that, they experience it and it's awful. So anyway, that's an aside. Okay, here's another. This one's pretty quick. So the Epic stack is built on top of Remix, which is now React Router version 7. And the Remix team built a Vite plugin. How many people here know what Vite is? Okay, cool. Vite is how many know what Webpack is? That's like going bigger. Okay, yeah. So it's a bundler for JavaScript for the client. And Vite is kind of taking the world by storm, and it's fabulous. It's amazing. And so the Remix team is like, we had our old compiler. We're going to switch over to Vite. And so, yeah, the challenge was, like, do I update the Epic stack to use that? Like, it is a lift. Like, it's something to do. And so I'm thinking, okay, one of the principles is adapt to productive tools and default to standards. So Vite is now becoming the standard of Remix. And then I want to keep on learning the new things and keep an open mind. Great, okay, applying those principles, I'm going to upgrade, and what I get is way better DX. Vite is amazing. I get future alignment, so I don't have to worry about, oh, well, I'm using the old compiler, so I can't do all these cool things, and all the plugins and everything from the ecosystem, which is also quite nice. This is the last example principle. Removing CSRF. So what's funny about this one is like 3 decision documents before this, I had one where we add CSRF. So I'm including this one just to illustrate that sometimes your decisions may change as you develop more knowledge and context around things, and even your principles can have a V2 as well. So how many of you know what I mean when I say CSRF? Okay. I feel like there's a lot of web devs over here, maybe, like most on this side. Okay, yeah. So CSRF stands for cross-site request forgery, and basically the idea is you have your banking site up here, and you've got cookies and all of that stuff for your authentication. And then you've got some malicious site. Maybe the user clicked on an email link or something over here. That malicious site could be making, have an image tag that actually is making a GET request on your banking site. And because you have the cookies, those will be included. And that is not good, because maybe that GET request actually is to transfer funds from one account to another. That would be very bad. Do not make mutations on GET requests. That would not be good. And then another thing is maybe there's a form on there, and even the JavaScript submits that form. So you can make a post onto to this other site. And that would also be bad because you do make mutations on posts. So the standard, or the browsers, have evolved over the years, and now they are not going to include cookies, especially when you put same site lax as part of your cookie definition. They're not going to send cookies from one site if one site makes a request to the other, so that's nice. Actually, back up. How CSRF solves this problem is when you render your HTML and you render that form, you can include a randomly generated string that can be included in the form. So when it's submitted, you can validate that, yes, this form or this request is coming from my website. And that's something that the attacker can't do. So that's what a CSRF token is. The browsers have evolved, and now they're not going to include cookies for GET requests. And with same-site lax, it's not going to include those cookies for post requests either. And so, yeah, we're pretty much safe. There are a couple situations where people could work around this, and if you do mutations in GET requests, then you can run into some problems there too. But don't do that. So, yeah, the challenge is reevaluating whether we should include the code for that, because it's non-trivial. There's some extra stuff you got to add in there. And yeah, the standard is we're going to handle that with same-site lax. So yeah, in my effort to do as little as possible, this is actually a principle. It's not just an expression of laziness on my part. And problem elimination decided to remove it, even though I just barely added it. So a little bit of humility and recognizing that you don't always make the right decision the first time. Okay, great. So now I want you to think about creating your own compass. So it's a bit of a process to do this. It took, like I said, it took me 2 months to really figure out, okay, how do I make my decisions? And yeah, it was some of the hardest brain work that I've done, just thinking. This is really helpful if you would do this as a team. Where you can discuss what thoughts you're thinking about with others. I pretty much just posted a bunch of thoughts on X and had people reply and stuff, because I work by myself. But yeah, discuss the decisions that you've made and try to pull out why did we choose that? And sometimes you might realize, oh, we probably made the wrong decision there. Then once you write down those decisions, that's not over. You're not set in stone or anything like that. So you can iterate on this. There can be a V2 of your principles, and that's totally fine. There's a lot of power in being intentional about the way that you write software. And when you're intentional about the way you write software, you go from reactive coding to intentional principle guided development that gets you to better software, better teams, a better time in the whole process. So being intentional buys you a lot. So here's my call to action for you as we wrap up here. I want you to identify one principle that really resonates with you. Maybe it's one of mine, or maybe it's something that you're just thinking about, yeah, like that really is something important to me. And this week I want you to figure out how that applies to some decision you're making or conversation you're having, and then write it down. And then write the next one, and the next one, and until you have a big giant list of 60 principles. So I've got a couple of resources for you. You can check out my principles, epicweb.dev/principles. While you're doing that, go to epicai.pro to see the exciting things coming up. And then principles.com, there's actually a book about everything that I've talked about today. I did not write it. It's very good. So principles.com, you'll find out more about that. The last thing I have to say to all of you, you got this. Thank you.